If Kentucky basketball is going to pull off the upset over the Missouri Tigers tomorrow, they're going to have to control the game at the rim.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be previewing Kentucky basketball's matchup with the Missouri Tigers, a big-time contest to end the regular season. Lots at stake for the SEC tournament. Going to be breaking it down for you here on today's show. A big-time game in Como. Can Kentucky spring the upset? I believe they can, and if they do, they're going to have to control the rim. We'll break that down, talk about Missouri's issues on defense as of late, why they might be an unstoppable offense heading into this game. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky basketball going on the road to Como as 3.5-point underdogs. 21-9, number 16 in the net are the Missouri Tigers on KenPom, if you want to look there, which I love to do quite often. You're going to see a lot of statistical similarities between these two sets of cats. Both the Tigers and the Wildcats look pretty similar, both on offense and on defense. Before we start looking at comparisons, though, let's talk about what Mizzou does well. Obviously led by Dennis Gates. Last year, if I'm not mistaken, Missouri winless in the SEC. This season sitting at 10-7 heading into their final contest. They have done so much work to kind of turn that program around. They've added a lot of transfers. They've had some guys grow up. And overall, this is one of the deepest, I think, most well-rounded rosters in the SEC, top to bottom. And it makes you question why they're 10-7. We'll get to why in just a little bit, but it really does impress me how they've been able, specifically Gates, has been able to turn this thing around so quickly. This is a top 15 team prior to their loss to Oklahoma, but still a top 25 team that metrics really do seem to like. And if you want to go look at KenPom again, Kentucky right there at 16th currently, Missouri at 15th, right above them. So the Tigers, I think, are right there as far as caliber of opponent. Both these teams, I think, are very similar. 84.6 points per game, which is really, really solid in the SEC. 9.7 steals per game, one of the best marks in the country. They will turn you over, they play with pace, and they really like to get out and run and make you work at the rim. They draw fouls better than nearly everyone in the country. They currently rank second in the nation in free throw rate. Absolutely insane. They only shoot 72.8% from the charity stripe. You would like to imagine if that number was a little bit higher, they would have been able to pick up some closer wins this season. You look early in the non-con at Illinois, Texas A&M, you could have possibly secured a win over Vanderbilt. Oklahoma is another game that I think you could have had a lot more success in if you had shot better from the free throw line, but still, this is a very good Missouri team that, like I mentioned, has beaten some pretty good opponents. Kansas being one of them. They went on the road and stunned Florida earlier this year. Both the Mississippi schools they beat, and they beat Alabama, dropped 110 points on their head back in the middle of February. This is a very good, well-rounded Missouri team. It's not like you look at one specific thing that they do well on offense. No, they get out in transition. They play really well at the rim. They are excellent at drawing fouls. They shoot very well from 3 and from 2. It's kind of where you look at this offense and say, okay, it's not necessarily about the statistics in this game. It's about the matchups. What can Kentucky do from a personnel standpoint to push back on what Mizzou likes to do offensively? Well, Mizzou does have a lot of different weapons Kentucky's going to have to pay attention to, one of them being Caleb Grill. I think he is your X factor here today for Mizzou. We'll get to the X factor for the Wildcats in a second, but excellent three-point shooter for the Missouri Tigers, shooting almost 53% from 3, 50% from the floor. Hyper efficient. He's shooting over 70% inside the arc. Just a great overall player. I believe he transferred in from Iowa State. This is a fifth-year guy in his second year with Mizzou. This is someone you're going to have to trail all game long. He is going to be a problem chasing him around. If I'm not mistaken, John Miller, host of Locked On Mizzou, has talked about this kid being Steph Curry-esque. It's a reason why he leads this team in points per game at such an efficient clip. He's a great shooter that deserves a lot of attention off ball. He can make you pay if you do not stay disciplined with him. That's actually something interesting about this entire Missouri team. If you leave them open, even just a little bit, they will make you pay. Brandon Ramsey of KSR had an excellent tweet earlier today talking about the contested versus uncontested splits for so many different players on Missouri's roster, and it is night and day across the board. You have to contest these Tigers or they will hurt you. Grill is a great piece. Mark Mitchell, the Duke transfer, is what everybody's talking about as far as matchups in this one. Major mismatch one-on-one. He can take it to the rim. He can handle the ball. He can play good defense, create off the dribble. He draws fouls like no other player at 6'9". He's somebody that you're really going to have to look to. Yes, he is a major aspect of this game, but the way that Grill operates off ball, I think is going to stress Kentucky's defense so much. That's why I've got him as the X factor. Then you also have to look to their third leading scorer in Tamar Bates, who averages 1.5 steals per game while also shooting a very high clip, 51% from the floor, almost 41% from three. So we'll continue to break this one down here. Why has Missouri struggled recently? Why have they lost so many games as of late? We'll tell you exactly why and how Kentucky could take advantage of it here in just a second. Before I do that, though, of course, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature here because it keeps me in every single moment of the game, keeps it exciting. Whether I'm backing my own team, I'm trying to pull for a late fourth quarter comeback for somebody else, I'm picking a specific player to hit some clutch shots down the stretch, I never feel like I miss my chance, and I'm always engaged. And the app is so easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. It's really an incredible, fun experience because right now, new customers can get $150. Get this, $150 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Incredible deal. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. You can make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky, Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I really appreciate you guys checking out the show. If you've not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, wherever you are tuned in, would love it if you did so. Let me know what you think about this contest here between the Tigers and the Wildcats. Regular season ending game, big-time game for both teams. Kentucky can get as high as the 5 seed, as low as the 8. Missouri can get as high as the 4 seed if they win this matchup and other things go their way. We'll continue to break this one down here. So we talk about how offensively they are hyper-efficient. 5th in the nation in adjusted offensive efficiency, almost 85 points per game. Defensively, they create turnovers. They get out in transition. They cause problems. Caleb Grill is a Steph Curry-like player. Mark Mitchell is a great player transferred in from Duke. That is a huge mismatch down low. Tamar Bates, a 6'5" wing that you have to pay attention to. I think Anthony Robinson II is also somebody you have to watch as the leading assist man on this roster, who's also shooting 50, 40, 77. This is a great Missouri team from top to bottom. But why? Why have they struggled so much recently? If you want to go look, they've lost. They started the season 17-4, 6-2. They're now 21-9, 10-7. They were 20-6 at one point. They've lost 3 out of their last 4 to close out the regular season. So what exactly has happened here? Well, if you go and look at the games that they've played, since beating Alabama 110-98, they have played, and I'm going to list the KenPom rankings here. 39th ranked Arkansas, 71st ranked South Carolina, 43rd ranked Vanderbilt, and 41st ranked Oklahoma. They have played 3 of those games on the road. The only game they won was at home against South Carolina, but all 4 of those contests, they did not play good defense at the rim. Go back and watch any of them, and you'll see Missouri has had some problems protecting the rim in a variety of ways. Straight line drives, pick and roll type stuff, post-ups in low clock situations, transition buckets. They cannot protect the rim well, at least as of late. Here are the statistics that I gathered for this show that I think are really telling when it comes to what Missouri is doing right now on the defensive end of the floor. In their last 4 games that they are 1-3 in against subpar SEC competition, they have given up an average of 89 points per game. That's right, 89 points per game to Arkansas, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma. South Carolina scored 71, which was the low point here, but Arkansas scored 92. Vandy scored 97 in overtime, and Oklahoma scored 96 in regulation. 89 points per game on average, while the opponents on average are shooting 65.1% inside the arc. 65.1%. The Division I average is 51%. To be given up 65 is insane, much less against the SEC's number 7, number 11, number 12, and number 16 two-point offenses in the SEC. You heard me correctly. Almost 3 out of the 4 teams that Missouri has faced are 11th or worse in the SEC in 2-point field goal percentage on offense. So you've given up 89 points per game. You've given up 65.1% from 2 against really bad SEC competition. On top of all of this, we've talked about point distribution before. Team scores 100 points. They get 25 of them from the free throw line. 25% of their points came from the free throw line, right? Teams are getting, in these 4 games, these opponents are getting 26.9% of their points from the free throw line. Missouri's average for the season, to give you context, is 20.6%. Over 6% higher than Missouri's average, and almost 10% higher than the Division I average at 18.8%. They cannot stop the ball when it gets to the rim. They can't stop it from getting there, and they can't stop it once it gets there. They have committed fouls. They have given up buckets. They have given up tempo. They have given up points. That's, at the end of the day, what you're looking at. You give up more points, the less likely of a chance you have to win if your offense is not carrying the load. And frankly, it's been good. It's been pretty dang good over the course of these last 4 games, but the defense has been nowhere near the level that they need it to be. So much so, in fact, that not only has Kentucky surpassed Missouri in adjusted defensive efficiency, they're like 10 spots better. And I told you at the beginning of the show that Kentucky and Missouri statistically on offense are very similar. Let's go through that real quick. Missouri's offensive efficiency is 126.3. Kentucky's is 125.1. They are 5th and 6th nationally, respectively. Missouri's effective field goal percentage, 56.7%. Kentucky's, 56.3. Turnover percentage, 15.2. Kentucky's, 15.1. You look at three-point percentage, exact same at 37.3%. Missouri shooting 57.3% from 2. Kentucky, 56.5%. Both teams are within a percentage and a half point of each other at the free throw line. Both teams are pretty similar in terms of block percentage, except Missouri just gets blocked a little bit more. Both teams turn the ball over from steals about the same rate. It is actually kind of crazy, too. Also, both teams take about the same amount of threes per game. It is almost identical, 42.2% of their three-point attempts over field goal attempts, their three-point rate, I should say, 42.2% to 42.1%. The only things that separate Kentucky and Missouri is that Kentucky plays a little bit faster overall, and then on top of that, they distribute the ball assist-wise much better, which I don't necessarily think is indicative of Missouri having a worse offense per se. I think the metrics actually disagree here, especially considering their rebound percentage is like 3.5% higher. I would say that you could throw that in as another factor that Missouri, I think, does better than UK. But what it tells me is that Missouri has so many different players here that can create an isolation or are problems individually, which goes back to Mark Mitchell is a big problem here one-on-one. Caleb Grill is such a huge problem off ball. And then you've got like guys like Tamar Bates, Anthony Robinson that are 6'5", 6'3", etc., guys that are lengthy that can create problems dribbling the ball. This is something that Kentucky fans this season have not really been thinking about or seeing, because Kentucky, so much of what they do predicates off of motion and what the big man is doing passing and what teams are doing defensively and how you react to it. It's not a lot of create and dribble drive and ISO ball. It is so much dependent on the system, whereas with Missouri, I think you have a great system in place, and then you've got great personnel that can kind of dictate how the game flows depending on what the opposing team is throwing at you. So I think that you have a great group of kids here on offense, but defensively, they have just not been putting it together. And it's been so many different bad teams, so to speak, doing so on them. I mean, you've got Arkansas, who is a hyper-athletic, run-up-and-down-the-floor type team that they killed them at the rim in both the first and second half, specifically in the second half when they went on like a 12-2 run to kind of solidify that victory. Oklahoma shooting an insane % in the first half, just doing nothing but beating Missouri off the dribble, just drive after drive after drive. We're going straight to the rim, and brother, we're laying it in. Some weird angles off the rim, but still finishing at an insanely high clip. This Missouri team, if they want to get back on track, if Kentucky wants to win this game, though, you look at it from both sides. Missouri has to get better at the rim, and Kentucky has to do what opposing teams have been doing to Missouri for the past 2 weeks. The X factors here, I mentioned Caleb Grill for the Tigers. Kentucky, I think, is going to have a hard time staying in front of all of Missouri's options. Whether or not Grill has a crazy game and goes off from three, I think could be telling here as to whether or not Kentucky's got an actual chance. That's why he's the X factor, so to speak. And then on the other side of that, I've got Otega Oweh as your X factor, not only because I think the driving to the basket and finishing efficiently at the rim is going to be huge for Kentucky, and he's a major part of what Kentucky wants to do on offense as far as taking shots in that area, but also I think he needs to be super sharp defensively. Super sharp defensively. I think sharp overall. You cannot have a game where he is turnover prone, or he is not making shots at the rim, or he is gambling on defense and giving things up. He has to be a perfect player in this game for Kentucky to win. We'll get to keys to the game, the specifics here for what Kentucky needs to do across the board in order to win this game. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Nissan. We here at Locked On Kentucky are all about the stats because, frankly, numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear, wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. You can take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. You can learn more at nissanusa.com. All right, wrapping up the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you again. Thank you guys so much for watching today. I really do appreciate it. For everybody that's here every single day, guys, I could shout you out in the comments. I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'll just say generically, you know who you are that are commenting every single day, that are giving your takes. Even if you disagree, I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you think about this game in the comments below. At Locked On UK on Twitter is where you can find me if you want to share any thoughts about the Cats, about what I have to say here on the show, or about this game specifically against the Missouri Tigers. All right, we've got 3 keys to the game here. I think that normally we have a lot of keys to the game, and I want to kind of cut this down to like, okay, well, these are like the keys. These are the key aspects, and if Kentucky can do well in these areas, then I think they're going to have a really good chance to win. First and foremost, you have to win the paint. Offensive rebounding for Missouri has been a strength on top of free throw shots, or free throw drawing, I should say. Offensive rebounding has to be limited in this game, and that comes through winning the paint. You also have to be way more efficient inside the Missouri. I told you earlier, Missouri in these past 4 games, they've had some pretty freaking good offense. It just has not been able to overcome what they're doing on the defensive end. So you have to be able to grab boards, have more energy there, grabbing boards on both ends of the floor, and then you also have to be more efficient scoring the basketball inside. I think specifically, like to a large extent, because the more that you can control the paint from two, I think the more, by making more shots, I think the more this puts stress on Missouri, and it's all about rushing different post players. I said it a ton with Janai Broome, and some of you were like, well, Janai can't be rushed. And I was telling you, hey, Janai actually did get rushed against both Duke and Florida, and then the exact same thing happened to him against Texas A&M. It's a matchup issue. Kentucky didn't have a guy that could completely shut down the entire roster, but Amari Williams did rush Broome. He couldn't handle him. Could not handle him. You have to do the same thing here, I think, inside the paint. And if you want to get really specific about matchups, I think Amari has to do so against Mitchell. You have to produce better statistics than Mark Mitchell in this game. If Amari does that, just has a better stat line across the board, you're probably looking up and saying, okay, Kentucky won minus a Caleb Grill, Tamar Bates, Anthony Robinson masterclass. Just a backcourt that just throws it in from half court, and there's nothing Kentucky can do about it. The second key to the game, outside of winning the paint and kind of controlling boards and Mitchell and being efficient and inside, is I think you need to win the turnover battle, which is going to be very hard for Kentucky to do, especially if Travis Perry is in the game for an extended period of time, which goes back to it goes to something we'll say in just a second. You have to win the turnover battle. If you cannot win the turnover battle, if you cannot force Missouri into more turnovers than they force onto you, you have to cash in on turnovers. You get, at the very least, you have to cash in. If you're getting 8 to 12 turnovers, you have to be able to turn that into 10 to 15 points. Have to. That is a major key in this game because Missouri is going to apply pressure. They're going to get theirs, and it's not going to be a fairly officiated game. So if you are getting ripped, if you are getting blocked at the rim, and it's considered a turnover, if you're getting stuff pushed out of bounds, I don't think you're going to get a fair whistle in this game. I just know that going into it. I think KSR did a great video on that recently about how Kentucky and teams in general it's not necessarily the road environment that gets them. It's the officiating in the road environment. If you're going to go watch that, I think the video crew there did a great job with that video. But you have to win the turnover battle first and foremost here. And if you don't, you cash in on the turnovers that you get. The final key to the game here, and this kind of goes inside with winning the turnover battle, is you get to the free throw line instead of missing shots, right? Lamont Butler has to be on the floor in this game. He cannot be somebody that fouls out or gets into foul trouble early because that puts pressure on Kentucky's offense to do things differently. Butler does so much for this Kentucky team. It is insane. He keeps the offensive flow going. He keeps the defense together. He is, as far as I'm concerned, the MVP of this season, and it's a hard pick considering just how good Amari Williams and Otega Oweh have been at various spots. Butler holds everything together. Again, 47.5% free throw rate. Insane for Missouri. You cannot let Butler be the recipient of early fouls because Perry will turn the ball over, or Oweh will turn the ball over. Noah, Chandler, whoever you want to put out there is probably going to be more turnover prone. That being said, Butler has been really bad in some various spots this season. I mean, he had 6 turnovers, 5 turnovers against Auburn. He had some really bad turnovers against Vandy that, frankly, I think pretty much cost them that game. But he's been so steady. Outside of a couple of bad games, he's been super steady. I think he's your best option here. I think he is absolutely your best option. The one that keeps everything together, keeps the flow going, get to the free throw line instead of missing shots, control the free throw line instead of having fouls drawn on you. Otega Oweh and Amari Williams, instead of missing layups at the rim, which Kentucky has been prone to do at various points, they have to get to the charity stripe. And of course, they have to cash in. So, win the paint, be more efficient inside, take a look at Mark Mitchell, see if you can match up against him if you're Williams, which, by the way, Mitchell's a good three-point shooter, so he's somebody that you have to guard instead of letting him shoot. You have to win the turnover battle, and you have to get to the free throw line instead of missing shots. You have to win the foul battle, in essence, is what I'm saying here, because of what Butler and what the rotation could look like if you don't. And then also Missouri shooting 35 free throws in this game would make me want to jump off a cliff, frankly. But unfortunately, we might be heading towards that. There's a lot on paper that could tell you Missouri's going to win this game. Missouri's going to win this game by, I guess, somewhere between a small and a comfortable amount. Missouri's got better offensive pieces overall. Kentucky's injured to crapping back. They've frankly gotten Butler and Carr healthy. Please let us get to the SEC tournament healthy. I would love that, but we'll see what happens here. I think Kentucky finds a way. There's not a number that I can point to. There's not a statistic that I can say, here, look, this is what's going to happen. I can only tell you what has to happen. I'm not going to tell you, hey, this is going to happen. But defense, I think it's going to be a big one for Missouri in this game. I think what Kentucky does at the rim will end up proving this one, winning the paint. Those are the keys. If Kentucky can execute in those areas, I believe they will win. I can't give you like a defining stat saying, well, Missouri is 2-4 this season when they face off against teams that are blue and white or something like that. I don't have anything like that for you where I can look at this and say, well, there's data that backs up why this Kentucky matchup should be favorable to the Cats. And I can't sit here and tell you that the personnel is favorable to UK either because we haven't seen these teams face off. You get what I'm saying? Sometimes in the SEC or sometimes across college basketball, certain teams can be so much better than the other on paper, and then you actually go and watch them and go, wait a minute, this is a more finesse team than a physical team. This is a more well-rounded squad than one that's focused on one player. You can kind of do different things with different teams, but it doesn't really matter what the paper says until you see them play on the court. You can't really replicate it, and you can't really do so with your scout team because it's not like you got 6'9", 235-pound guys sitting on the bench waiting to go at it, right? So this is a tough one for UK. You've got the keys. You've got the possibilities. This is what Kentucky can do, and they will have to do to win. But I don't necessarily know if it's going to happen. I'm going to say Kentucky wins. Gut check, Kentucky wins. And if they don't, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. I think Kentucky heading into the SEC tournament as the 8 seed, we'll see what happens around them. Matchups could be interesting. I'll say that. It could be a lot of different teams. It could be Ole Miss. It could be Mississippi State. It could be South Carolina. It could be Arkansas. It could be a number of teams, right? But what you have to do here, if you're a Kentucky fan, heading into tomorrow, it's an 11 a.m. tip in Como. You have to have hope. I don't think, as a Kentucky fan, heading into your regular season finale with Butler and Carr healthy, it would make sense to do anything other than go out there and just root for your team to win. Hope they win. Let's try and be positive here, guys. I'm walking into this one knowing the officiating's probably not going to be great. We'll see what happens. I have hope. I think Kentucky will get it done. Let me know what you think, though, in the comments below. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave that in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless. Go Cats!